Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Awakened Woman podcast, the place for deep and real chats with powerful women. I'm your host, Ale, and in today's episode, I'm with Jen, who is a spiritual and energy healer. So she's been focusing after she's going to go through her own story on her own transformation, on her own healing, her own journey of personal growth and coming back home to her authentic self. So I actually met her recently and we just started having these deep chats, like very organically, very casual and very powerful conversation. So we need to have an episode together because I think her own story is not only very powerful, but also I know that maybe a lot of you will resonate with what she went through and more importantly, what she did to transform, change that. So welcome, Jen. It's a pleasure to have you here. And yeah, give us a little bit of an intro of yourself.
I thank you for having me on the podcast. And like you said, it's been a very interesting way of meeting, and it was great. So today, obviously, with the topic that we've chosen to talk about, it's quite interesting. I spent a few years trying to figure myself out like everybody else, and running away from things, finding myself again, running away from more things. And so it's been a back and forth journey, but it's progressing somewhere, it's going somewhere. So yeah, so I'm looking forward to have a deeper conversation about this.
Yeah, definitely will. We are just tapping into that ourselves and that message and it was just very natural conversation when we were
Yeah, it
chatting.
was, wasn't it?
Yeah, so maybe let's start a little bit with your summary, whatever you would like to share with the audience on your own story and what really took you into this transformation and spiritual journey.
So I grew up in France. So I spent my half of my life over there. Grew up in a family, Asian background family. Um, I grew up in a household that wasn't very, not, I wouldn't say not loving, just where that was difficult. It was difficult for them to show their love
Mhm.
with words or affection. So I suffered a lot from that growing up, I think. And I'm sure a lot of you can resonate as well. And I think there was a lot of toxic and abusive pattern throughout my childhood that I've witnessed and I've also suffered from. And eventually, at about maybe I'd say 16, I had this big epiphany, and I was like, okay, this is not the life for me. I'm sick of witnessing what my mum has gone through or what I'm going through. And I was like, this is just not the life for me. And I work really actively towards saving a lot of money when I was a teenager. And I was like, you know what, at 18 years old, I'm just gonna go pack my bags and just move on the other side of the world. Um, little did I know, moving for a short while became 13 years later. So here I am in my 30s, having spent about 13 years in Australia now,
Wow.
um, away from my problems,
Yeah.
away from my family, pretty much. So, yeah.
Wow, yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think there's always, I feel so at some point in this journey that there's this epiphany, how you said, or realization of I cannot keep living life like this. And for us to get to that point, I feel there's also like a higher knowing that we have already tapped into that wisdom and that knowing that there's a better life out there, that we can always change and transform our lives, because if we didn't really make the decision, is because we haven't even tapped within that powerful self who already knows the answers within us and knows, no, there's a turning point from now. We cannot keep living this way, and we can call it turning point or breakthroughs. There's many terminology, but at the end of the day is when we as humans realize there's a better life for me here, and that's what I'm gonna be focusing on. So what would you say were your key turning points that you were like, I cannot keep living like this? Like, Was it one single thing, or let's say one cumulative things, but what was the main feeling or the main situation that made you take that direction?
Well, I think it's like a accumulation of things over the years from when I was a little child to when I was a teen. So my dad was very abusive towards the children and my mother, and I think I just sat back and I just witnessed so much aggression throughout the years, verbally, and I also noticed a lot of emotional damage.
Yeah,
So I feel like I was emotionally damaged because I grew up with the feeling of being unworthy.
yeah.
And I think there's specific words that came out from my dad's mouth. I remember I used to be an athlete when I was younger, and he came to one of my games in 8 years and he said the words like, "Oh, you just shit."
Oh, wow.
And I think that was one of those moments I was like, oh my God, my own dad is telling me that I'm not worthy of anything. And I
Yeah,
think that's one of those that kind of just was the pivotal moment for me.
yeah,
And I think I just still carry that today. There's still residue of it somewhere.
yeah,
Obviously, you work, you know, towards healing those parts of yourself
yeah,
that you feel not worthy of. But I think that was one of those moments. I was like, shit, I cannot take this anymore.
yeah.
And then that's when I decided, when I was able to, anyway, physically able to and legally able to, I was like, I'm going to pack my bags. I'm going to go for 6 months. Let's see where life takes me. Um, but originally, I don't think I was thinking, okay, this right now at 18, my life's going to change. Or I deserve better. I just thought, I'm going to run away from this.
Yeah.
So it's better for me to run away than staying. And that was more my reasoning towards leaving.
Yeah, yeah, wow. Well, first, yeah, I'm sorry that you had to go through that because, none of us deserve to go through any of that, even less as children. The thing is, we now have the power to change and transform our story. We cannot go back to change our parents and what happened, but, the best way for anyone who's been through challenging things, I think all of us, we are not exempt on dealing with these things is just knowing that you can change your life and you don't need to be carrying that story and those words that your father said to you. So those words I'm sure but if their audience here and it's the first episode, this is something that I say a lot, and you probably have heard from other coaches or therapists. Is never about who you are. Is always about the other
Them.
person, which it doesn't take away the pain. It doesn't take away probably what caused within yourself, because there's the duality, right? The duality of having to go through the grief of having a father that didn't see your worth, that didn't give you the emotional support, the affection, the care that you needed as a kid, and also the other side of the duality, which is what gave you the power and the resilience and the strength to say, this is not what I deserve. I know this is not okay, which is probably another even topic, but this is not okay. I can change my life. So yeah, I think also very important to acknowledge your power and your resilience there. Like probably you were tapping again with that woman inside that you knew you deserved healing. You knew you deserved better. So okay, so then that was your turning point. So then from there you moved away from home, and tell us a little bit how that transformation or inner work started for you.
I think for a long time, I kind of refused to talk about anything to do with my childhood or anything with family. I don't know if it was related to the feeling of shame, and had wanting to be perfectionist about my life, of how it would be portrayed, to people. So I think perfectionism and shame goes very closely together. So I think it was something that I wasn't proud to admit that, okay, my life is not perfect and this is what happened to me. And I didn't want those events to define me. So I worked actively in trying to surround myself with people who were lifting me up. And it took me a while, obviously, coming from Europe to a new country that is Australia, where
Mm,
English is not my first language. It was quite difficult at first.
mm,
Um, then I fell in love. I met somebody, and I remember he used to say to me, "You talk about your mum a lot,
mm,
but you never mention about your dad.
mm,
There's something that you're carrying inside of you that you're not willing to talk yet." And I remember we were in bed and we were just lying there, and he was just like, whenever you're ready, talk to me."
mm.
And I just burst out crying. And it was the first time I cried about something that I hadn't even spoken about.
Yeah,
And the most important thing in that example was that I felt safe enough to talk about it without really talking.
yeah,
So I think that was a pivotal moment for me as well. It's like he had given me the sense of security that I had never felt before, that allowed me to speak my truth
mm,
and own up to what had happened. So not what had happened to me, but
yeah,
what just happened.
yeah.
So I think that was like
Yeah.
big change.
Wow. So that probably is also like a person who probably motivated you to, start looking at that pain that you were not facing, and you were not facing it because you were not ready.
Yeah,
So
100%.
right. So now we see it. We are only meant to heal and look at things when we are ready. If we are not aware and we are not working on something, it's because we are not ready yet. And we
Yeah.
need to honor ourselves and our body. So would you say that that person was probably like someone who also motivates you, not only gave you safety and the knowing that you deserve better, but
Yeah.
also, gave you that deeper reassurance that, you could start looking at that pain and probably start talking about it and start like really healing. Yeah, start your healing journey.
Yeah. So I think my ex was like, obviously, he was the start of that journey for me to admitting, okay, I went through a lot of things, traumatic events, and I was not processing it. What I was doing was just running away, running away from my problems. The least I talked about it, the better I felt.
Yeah.
Um, but it was a false sense of reality because I was changing my reality, and being vulnerable with someone that you feel safe with and that's going to accept you no matter how hard life has been to you
Mm-hmm.
was eye-opening, and it was heart heartwarming. It
Yeah.
was like, oh my goodness, I can finally heal from my heartache.
Yeah.
I can finally maybe start the journey of fixing fixing what my parents, did. Because I talk about my dad, but there's a lot of my mum doing. So there is that, fine line, duality of things there where you're like, okay, you blame one, but actually you need to keep the other one accountable as well.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think it was in my early 20s. I think I met my ex then when I was like 20.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the first person I've spoken about this to was him.
Yeah. And I think like what you mentioned here is very important and powerful, because a lot of women, you, myself, and a lot of the women I have chats with, my clients, we have a father wound, and that's coming from a man who didn't have a healthy masculine. We didn't have healthy masculine figures. We didn't have that emotional connection. We didn't have that emotional support. Therefore, we didn't feel safe with the masculine. So that's why we women, when we are healing our father wound, it's so important to surround ourselves with people who make us feel like help us feel safety. And yes, it is our job, because that's something that I said, it always starts within ourselves. But that doesn't mean that because it's on myself, that work of feeling safe, I'm gonna surround myself then with any people who don't make me feel safe, because at the end it's my responsibility. No, is helping yourself with also building those secure and safe relationships, because a lot of our wounds are also healed in relationship. There's only so much we can do on our own. We are,
Mhm.
humans that need connection. We are born with connection and attachment with our parents. We are not meant to live life on our own because, you know, back in the days, we will die, we won't survive. So we are meant to, you know, live in communities and build connections. So finding that people that will support you in your healing journey, and that's probably like one of the key messages here on the episode is so key. And we can see it in your own story, Jen, like how, you know, you had the awareness of your pain or your own story, or, you know, your family history. And also, you know, you had someone that came to your life that gave you enough safety, enough reassurance that it was okay, that whenever you were ready, it was okay to talk. So I think that's even important. If people are listening to us, and you have a partner that is blaming you and shaming you because you are not opening up, that's maybe something to look at, because you open up when you are ready.
100%. I totally agree with you on that one. And I think that was I just remember that moment so well. 11 years on now, I still remember that moment where I was laying in bed and it was dark, and we had been together for like a few months, and he just hugged me. He's like, "It's okay, you can cry. I feel you, I see you. You don't have to tell me what's happening." And I think that's what probably made me fall in love with that person even more.
Oh.
And we were very spiritually connected, we just felt like everything was aligned back then. Um, Everything happened for a reason. And I didn't realize that I could, like, my ex loves me a lot. And I think I didn't realize that could be loved this much.
Yeah.
And that was hard. It was almost like too hard to accept at times. Like, oh my God, I'm not used to this amount of love. What's happening to me? I feel almost I'm drowning in it. So then my usual self, because like I said, I ran away from my problems. I became an avoidant.
Yeah.
So in that position, I was like, when someone suffocates me, I feel like I need to escape. I just can't be, I need to breathe. I'm Pisces, I like to flow, don't corner me anywhere, I don't like it. So there were times where I was like, oh my God, is it me trying to sabotage this good thing that's happening in my life? Or is it really overbearing?
Yeah.
So those, I think, like the attitude I had towards it still stayed with me at times.
Yeah.
And I think I still finding myself running away, coming closer, running away, coming closer. But it all comes from fear. It's fear.
Yeah, so and that's probably something that we know we all go through, and we are also touching here a little bit on attachment style. So then you mentioned that you were asking yourself, is this, am I sabotaging? Am I running away? Or is this too much for me to, cope with at the moment? So what was your decision, or what you came as a, realization there?
Well, I think at times definitely it was overbearing because I'm someone who's quite independent. I'm very sociable. I love being around people, but I also like my personal space. And I think at the time I lacked a bit of that. He wasn't giving me a lot of space because I was like, meeting was like too much for me.
Yeah.
And I start sabotaging it.
Yeah.
And then I realized, like, oh shit, am I doing it because I feel like I'm not deserving of to be loved?
Yeah.
And it's something that we were finding in our relationship. He was constantly saying, like, I'm here and I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Like, it's okay. Like, you deserve this. And I was like, okay, I had to repeat it to myself. I'm like, okay, he loves me, and it's because he really mean it. And I'm not gonna get hurt. I'm gonna be safe. I'm gonna be supported.
Yeah.
So yeah. So it was like a lot of reflection. And for someone who was 20 back then, it's like,
Wow.
how did I even tap into this?
Yeah, that sounds like a really healthy relationship back then. And something that we sometimes don't really talk much about is how challenging can be a healthy relationship after toxic relationship, after not even knowing what healthy is. And these relationships are the ones that are gonna bring all these patterns. Like, for example, you identify the pattern of running away. But it's also very important point, because a lot of the times we come from codependent families where there were no emotional boundaries whatsoever. So we don't really understand what is healthy anymore. We don't really even have a healthy definition of love. We think that love could be attachment. We think that love could be manipulation. We think that love is going to be taken away. We think that love is breadcrumbs, because we will have the definition of love according to what was our first experience as kids. So when we are adults and we start recognizing these patterns, and we start looking at, okay, this relationship actually is healthy. They look like they respect each other, they appreciate each other, they support each other. We start learning that probably our definition of love and what a healthy relationship is not really accurate. So, and then it comes the challenge of having to face that in relationship. And yes, a lot of the times can be our own patterns playing up, but I also think at times it could be not setting boundaries. Because, for example, you mentioned you felt supported, you felt that he was giving the reassurance that he was not going anywhere. That is foundation for a healthy and a secure relationship. However, you also mentioned that it was very much like, even could be codependent, because he was always there. So maybe what you really needed was that space too. So learning to recognize, yeah, I'm enjoying this, but I also need my space, and go slow, because it could be too much for us, people who, grew up in mainly, I would say, emotionally unhealthy dynamics, or
Yeah.
not healthy all the
And
time.
balance.
Yeah. So we need more time. We need more, space to process that. So did you kind of like identify there, is this about boundaries? Is this about me needing time? Or is this, only my patterns or sabotaging playing up?
So I think for me, it was a bit of like old habits, childhood patterns, and trauma that my body was withholding. And also, actually, like, I needed a space because I remember the first time he told me he loves me, I just stood there and I pat him on the shoulder. I'm like, oh, thank you. And my body froze. I was like, I can't believe you just said that. Is he crazy? But then I remember for him, it was a hard knock. Like, he was someone who was very anxious attachment style, and I was avoidant. And avoidant and anxious kind of attract each other.
Yeah.
So it's the push and pull constantly. So for
Mhm.
me, it was difficult at first. I think throughout our relationship of like multiple years, there was a times you could feel was very unbalanced.
Mhm.
And I don't think it was probably the healthiest relationship because it didn't end up well. But that relationship had moments of, wow, this is amazing.
Yeah.
This is amazing. This guy is allowing me to be me and showing my true colors and accepting me fully, loving me like bad hair day, cry hair day, being angry, being bitchy, all of those. And I was like, he's accepting me even on my worst days. But the thing there where you were like, oh, this sounds like a very, very healthy relationship. This relationship ended in him pretty much triggering my traumatic childhood.
Mhm.
So my dad was was a cheater. He cheated with my mom multiple times. So I witnessed that.
Yeah.
And then my partner at the time also cheated on me.
Mhm.
So for me, it was really hard because my world crumbled. So all those years of transformation growth that I had been working towards and allowing someone to come in had just come down for a crash again. And
Wow.
that was a hard one. That one was a hard one.
That must have been so hard, because he was the one who kind of like allow you to open up, because you felt safe with him. But then you open up, you were, you know if willing to look within, willing to look at that pain and work on it. to work on the relationship too, but then you also were, let's say, betrayed. So how did you work on that after it, to trust men again? That must have been a hard one.
It is very difficult because I remember I had lost so much weight. I was crying my eyes out, and everything that I had built up in my head was like, okay, this is not happening now. And the life you thought you had built together is not real.
Mhm.
And that's almost annoying because by him admitting he cheated and saying, like, I'm sorry, it's great that you're sorry, but it doesn't change the pain I feel and I felt then.
Yeah.
It was really hard. It took me a while, and I think I'm still working on it. It's been what, 6, 7 years, and I think I still have those traumatic response at times where I'm feeling a bit triggered in new relationships, and that's because I watch my dad do something, then I watch my ex doing the same thing,
Mhm.
same in different situation, obviously not to the same extent, but I questioned myself. I was like, am I really not that worthy of
Mm.
someone showing up for me, staying for me, and just having me as the only person in their lives? Like, am I not enough?
Yeah.
So it stayed with me for a long time. I went through a really dark, dark patch.
Yeah, wow. So we will touch on also on that part, on that phase, if you would like to share like part of it, mainly probably focusing on how you turn your life around and started transforming after going through that dark time. But before we get into that, I wanted also to mention how how challenging can be our own family and history patterns, that when we are not aware of them, that we keep repeating them, we keep repeating what we are familiar with since our childhood in our adulthood. And why I have an episode that I talk in depth about patterns, but just on a general high level is because of our own beliefs, and because we are always going to get attracted to what is familiar, even if what is familiar is not healthy. So that's why it's so important cultivating self-awareness. And we cannot cultivate self-awareness without self-love, really getting to know who I am and who am I. And then the one of the key parts and why this work is so important is because all, like, if we don't do this work, we will tend to question our worth.
Yeah,
We will tend to always come back to internalize people's bad actions and mistakes about us, and that comes back to childhood, feeling I'm not lovable, I'm not worthy, I'm not enough. And yeah, we need to go through these situations to transform, to work on those patterns, to bring those patterns to life, to the surface, because otherwise we can just keep living life in automatic and repeating patterns, which is actually what a lot of people choose to do. However, for us, the ones who have the courage to know, I deserve a better life, I know that there's something bigger within me that is telling me I deserve better, I deserve to be healed. And that this is why that love that we are constantly seeking, and that love that we couldn't receive entirely from our parents, is the love that is always been within us.
yeah.
And I feel
It
that's the
starts from
love
us.
from us, exactly. And that's the love that tell us, look within, there's more, the answers are within. So now I come back to your the phase where you went through that dark time. And yeah, how did you navigate that?
I think at a time I didn't have a lot of support. My network support wasn't available to me. So I reverted back to alcohol. That's when I went through it. I pushed through. I was like, if I numb the pain, I'm not feeling it. And for someone who was, what, 23-year-old, I was like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
And I'd come to work, I'd be crying in the storeroom, and then my mother-in-law at the time would call me, and it went to a point where she was like, she called me, she's like, Jen, I love you and I know this comes from my child, but you need to see a psychologist. And I was like, what do you mean I need to see a psychologist? Like, you're not eating, you've lost 10 kilos in 2 months, you are just crying your eyes out all the time, you're drinking before work, like, you need to get someone to see you, otherwise I'm flying down. She lives in Brisbane, otherwise I'm flying down and I'll check you myself. And I think she represented the mother that I didn't have, the mother figure, the safety net that I had lost when I moved overseas, because I'm not close to my family. So for me, that was the closest to a mother figure I had.
Yeah.
So for her to say that to me, it was harsh word, be like, I love you, but how about we fix this before it gets too bad to fix it?
Wow.
So then I just went, and I remember going to GP. I was like, okay, I felt very anxious. I've recently gone through a breakup and I'm feeling very depressed. And I was like, I need to go have some medication. Can I go get some medication? And I have some antidepressant, anti-anxiety tablets that's going to just calm me and not feel this pain anymore. And I remember he pulling out a test, because you have to do a test at a GP and be like, how depressed are you? And depending on your score, they'll be like, okay, pardon, I'll give them to you or not. So my score was 29 out of 30.
Wow.
So he was like, okay, this is bad. For a 23-year-old, this is bad. So I will give you anti-anxiety tablets, but you have to go see a psychologist. So then here comes my first appointment with a psychologist, and I'm thinking, I never cry. I'm not going to cry. Don't want to talk about my childhood. Don't want to talk about this. Within a second of me walking in there, bawl my eyes out. And I think through talking to her made me realize there's a few similarities of my dad's story and my ex as well. And what I hated the most was I identify myself as my mother. And I was like, I'm just like my mother. I'm just going to sit here and be cheated on and be mistreated and just going to take it. And I felt anger towards myself. I had so much anger that I was ashamed of the person I had become. And that was so sad. It was so sad to have that realization. Like, I'm despising what my mum is. So, yeah, that was pretty much the journey I had to go through. Those moments of like feeling worthy and unworthy, worthy, unworthy.
Yes. It's yeah, sometimes we don't understand why we have to go through the things that we go through. We, in hindsight, of course, we always try to know, to think that there's always a higher reason why we go through everything we go through. It's part of our journey, it's part of our transformation. There's no happiness without sadness. There is no love without heart touch. So it's just the duality that sometimes is very hard and challenging to experience, and as human beings. But also, you mentioned something really important to clarify as well, like, because I think we all go through that, is referring to unhealthy coping mechanisms, which is the health, our health. So we compromise our own health, ourselves. We abandon ourselves when we are going through these challenging times, because we tend to avoid the pain. It's too painful. So then we start drinking, there's drugs and party, like there's so many unhealthy, like, addictions, and even like excessive shopping, excessive working. These are all forms of avoiding, and one is not better than the other one. They are all amplifying the wound and the pain, and not really addressing. So at the end of the day, if anyone is going through something like that now, and we are all always gonna go through challenges in life, we cannot control that. We cannot control the external circumstances, but I feel like it's always coming back to feeling the emotions. Like, sometimes we don't even have to know exactly why things happen the way they did, and what are my limiting beliefs, and what is my story, and what is my what are my wounds, like what is happening. Sometimes we don't really even have to understand. Just by sitting with the emotion and letting that emotion be expressed, like the anger, the resentment, the grief. We all carry so much grief for not having
Anything, yeah.
any and not having the parents that we needed. Because at the end of the day, our parents are humans. They are not perfect. And we put them in a pedestal as kids. And we think they're going to be our saviors and our everything. And the reality is it doesn't happen like that. And that's something that we realize when we're adults. But coming back to that point in your story, because I think very key points that you had there, like that could have pushed you even down more, like, I'm just gonna,
I'm just done with life.
yeah, I'm just done with life. I'm just like, I don't have any hopes. So what made you keep going? What was then the point where you started working more on
Because
your.
I think I looked at myself in the mirror. It went to a point where I looked at myself in the mirror. I was 10 kilos down. I had developed a gallbladder disease. Um, I felt sad all the time. I was miserable to be around. I was miserable to work with. I had lost my spark for life. Or I'm someone who's quite bubbly and witty. I had no jokes. And for me, if the people who know me know that if Jen doesn't joke, there's something wrong. Or if Jen doesn't laugh, something's wrong there. And I just had lost all type of jokes.
Yeah.
I had no capacity. There was no way I could laugh and feel things. And being on those medication just made it worse because at first, what sounds like a good idea didn't sound like so much of a good idea after because I felt withdrawals from it. I felt numbness. So when someone shared a really happy news, I was just couldn't feel anything. I was like, I was smiling, but inside of me there was death. That's what it felt like inside of me. So looking at myself in the mirror every day, I was like, do I want to be that person, this person who's alive but lifeless?
Yeah.
And I was like, no, I don't. And then I think 6 months in, I was like, Jen, you getting off them. And I went off cold turkey. I got off them cold turkey and it was hard, but I pushed through for 7 days. I was like, okay, this is good. This is good. But I still had to go to a lot of therapy and having to reparent myself. So I had to work through the inner wounds and look inwards and be like, okay, what did I miss in my childhood?
Yeah.
Because it's all nice to look at the most recent moment, but the core of it is the childhood and the foundation of what I've witnessed, like the foundation that I've embedded inside of me,
Yeah.
which I've witnessed, and I think it's normal.
Yeah.
So, because I saw my mum coping with all this abuse for so long, I almost thought, even though I knew it wasn't right, because she stayed, I thought this is normal. I think you can do it too. He cheated, he lied to you, he's mentally abused you, but maybe if you stick around, he might change. So we tend to stick around for the potential of someone.
Yeah.
And I stuck around for that. And then I was like, no, I'm done. And there was one point I was like, no, that potential is never going to come.
Yeah. Yeah, we either repeat the story or break the pattern.
Yeah.
So and we can have both. Like, for example, you at some point mentioned that you were repeating the story and probably now you are choosing to break that pattern. So yeah, it's really, powerful story. Of course, you went through a lot of challenges and probably very hard moments. Sorry, my cat just wants to. Yeah, which we again, like, we probably only when we go back to connect those dots and really ask ourselves, okay, this is why I had to go through, and we kind of like start understanding. So now coming back to this, where you are at now, what would you say were, probably let's focus on the three key learnings from what you've shared with us, those challenging, very challenging situations, whichever you want, you decide to pick. What were the three key learnings from you?
I think for me was like, starts from you. Everything starts from you. Whether always, like I said to you when we first met, is that I never want to look. I look at myself sometimes when I go through challenges. I'm like, do I want to? Do I want to look back in my life in 20 years and have regrets? Am I happy with the way it panned out? Obviously, you meet people that are not so nice or nice people. They might do great actions and not so good actions towards you, and you might go through challenges. But would you regret it? And I'm just like, do I sit here and just be a victim of what happened to me, or am I going to go get it? If
Mm.
something bad, if things don't fall in place, like you had planned in your head, that's fine. But you just want to sit here and watch your life passing in front of you. And I just didn't want to be that person.
Yeah.
So what I've learned is like I've got fire in me, despite what happened in the past in my childhood. Those moments don't define me, and I think that was really important for me. That everyone has trauma. What is traumatic to me is not traumatic to you, and vice versa. That is how my body chose to respond to that. And through, like I said before, when we met, I did Vipassana, this deep tapping meditation sort of technique where it was silent course where I had to sit with my emotions. There was no eye contact, no physical distraction. There was nothing to read, nothing to talk about.
Mhm.
I was just sat there in a room with hundreds of people meditating for so long, 11 hours a day. I just had to sit with my emotions, despite how uncomfortable they were.
Wow.
And it's witnessing those emotions and not wanting them to either eradicate
Mhm.
or craving them. For me, it's such a massive lesson for me is I constantly say to myself, don't crave this feeling. Do not try to push it away either. Just sit with it. So I think these are probably the three key learning that I got out of this.
Yeah, no, that's like so powerful. And I really hope everyone is listening until this part, because this is where the breakthroughs, the key learnings, and what you can take away from this chat with Jen. I think very important learnings and key points, like not identifying with your story. You are not your story. You will always have choices. You don't have to be a victim of your past. You are the co-creator of your own life. Yes, you accept and have compassion for your past, and you also take ownership and accountability to change your future. And sitting with your emotions, I think is another, like what you mentioned, is the healing, the transformation is in sitting with the pain. And you think in your mind that it is too painful, but what is creating pain is actually avoiding the pain. Because
It's the
when you sit,
clinging,
yes,
the
because when
clinging.
you sit with the emotion and you let it be released, emotions are just energy stuck in your body. So you are giving them permission to be transformed, transmuted, and released. And the pain is in having all that tension in our bodies, and then having all this conflict, and then trying to find logic ways of why things are not working for me, or why I'm always like this way, or why I'm always reacting, why I have these patterns, why I'm attracting this. The answers are not in your mind, the answers are in your body. So
So
come back
true.
to your body. So thank you so much, Jen. I think is yeah, I really, I'm always really grateful for women like you to, are willing to share their own stories, and not as a way to have some compassion. Is more as a way to empower others and show them you have choices, you can change your life regardless of what you went through. So I really
100%.
appreciate that. And thank you again for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Is there anything else, like a last message that you would like to share?
Just, be the master of your own life. I think you've got one. I think it's best to live it fully, whether it's it goes bad on Monday, it might go great on Tuesday. So not to dwell too much on the negative. I know it sounds harder than, than what it seems. It is hard, I'm not going to just deny it, but just to remind ourselves every day a bit of positivity, um, will probably help you a lot in that journey of healing journey.
Yeah, I think that's very important to focusing on the day to day. Don't look at the bigger picture because healing doesn't have any timeline, healing doesn't have a roadmap, healing doesn't have any guides. Healing is very unique for every person. And the best you can do is allow yourself to do one thing that will make you feel better every day. And when you look at the big picture, in hindsight, that thing in 30 days, 60 days, 1 year will be the thing that will transform your life.
100%. Yeah.
So, yeah, I hope everyone is, leaving this conversation with value, insights for them to apply on their own journeys. Remember, this is part of, my coaching program. You were born to make an impact, and you have the power within to heal yourself and transform your life. It always starts with yourself. So again, thank you, Jen.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I will put also Jen's Instagram on the description if you would like to just thank her for sharing her own story, or even if you have any questions or would like to know a little bit better some of other aspects of her own journey that she didn't mention here, you can also reach out to her. So thank you, Jen, and have a beautiful night.
Thank you. Have a good night.